where alcohol and drugs took me to. Oh, I'd love to be able to tell you that. That's where I took me to. The only thing that alcohol and drugs did in my life, they kept me alive long enough to find Alcoholics Anonymous. That's all. I'm as sure as I'm standing here without alcohol working in my life, I'd have blown my brains out before I was 9 years old. I've always been some type of an emotional misfit. I never belonged wherever I was. I was always restless and irritable and discontent. I was always out of step with everybody else. I never seemed to like them. They never seemed to like me. They never seemed to care for me. I always felt less than or left out. I just felt that way. And this was coupled with a tremendous wall of anger inside of me that made me angry about everything that went on inside. And I didn't understand that. I didn't understand that was symptoms of this terrible malady of mine, which was later going to take me into the gates of insanity and death and beyond. I didn't know that. I just knew that I couldn't stand the things that I was thinking in my head. I just knew that they were all wrong, and I didn't know what to do about them. I shouldn't think the way I thought about it. See, everybody in my family were drunks. Everybody. My mother, my father, my uncles, my aunts, my grandfather, they all drank whiskey. They drank whiskey and sold anything they'd get $1 for. They didn't care what it was. My uncles were my role models. They made whiskey, sold it into whorehouses, went to penitentiaries. I told myself, I'm going to be different than they are. And I was. I smuggled dope, sold it into whorehouses, went to penitentiaries. But I was different. I damn near died being different. In Alcoholics Anonymous, I damn near died being different. And that's another story all in itself. I started looking for a way out of this dilemma a long, long time ago because I knew I needed a way out. I knew I needed something, and I knew I didn't have it. I didn't know what it was. What I was doing crawling around that cell in solitary confinement 28 years ago, barking at the moon, the same thing I did scratching around in the dirt as a kid. I was looking for something. I didn't know what it was I was looking for, but I always knew that I didn't have it. I knew it was somewhere out there, and I was going to find it. I had to find this thing. I don't know what it was. It was always some type of a compelling need way down deep inside of me to find that thing, whatever it was. I had to find it because I knew I didn't have it, and I knew somewhere it was. And I started looking around for it. I didn't know what it was. I looked up, and there stood my grandmother. I thought she had it, because my grandmother lived till she was 9 years old, and she never drank or she never smoked a cigarette. And I thought my grandmother had it. And I thought if I went where my grandmother went and did what my grandmother did, I'd be like my grandmother. I'd have it too. But you see, I never understood that wherever I went, I went. I mean, that's kind of deep for some of you heavy thinkers, but that's the way it was. Because I went with my grandmother one time. I left these people that I felt different and strange and irritable around and hated. And I went on the other side of town with another group of people, nice people. And I felt different and strange and irritable and hated all them too. And I didn't understand that. And then I started waiting for these quote and unquote superior people to tell me what was the matter with me. I remember sitting back there in that pew with my grandmother in this church a long, long time ago, and this guy mounts this rostrum, and he stands there with his air of authority and his magnificence about him, and I wait for him to tell me why I feel this way, and he tells me I'm supposed to love and honor and respect my parents. He says, you're supposed to love your brothers and your sisters, and I didn't. I hated them. I hated them for reasons I didn't even understand. I felt very guilty about that. That long arm of guilt went down inside of me and damn near choked me to death that day. And I became frightened to death that they were going to find out I was hating when I was supposed to be loving. And that was the thing I did most of my life. I started masquerading out here because I thought people was going to find out what was going on in there. And that's the first time I remember having that feeling. But I carried that feeling with me into the gates of insanity and death and beyond and into Alcoholics Anonymous for a long time. That people were going to find out that what was going on in here was not what was going on out there. And I didn't understand that. I remember walking out of church that day, and my old man standing there drunk and hungover, and he tapped me on the head and said, son, if you continue to go to church, you're going to grow up to be just like me. I don't know what it did for my old man, but I ain't been back to church since. And it ain't got nothing to do with church. It's got a lot to do with me. It's got a lot to do with me. I remember laying awake in this house that I lived in the middle of the night. It was an alcoholic's house, and 2 drunks were working in there, and that's a terrifying place for little kids to live in. It's frightening, because there's screaming and there's yelling and there's cussing and there's flesh hitting flesh and there's breaking furniture and deathly silence. And every once in a while, the old man come got me and started kicking me around. He didn't do it to my brothers. He just did it to me. I remember laying there when they're gone at night, and I'm thinking about the things that are going on in my life I don't understand. I think about my uncles who live in penitentiaries and my aunts who work in those houses on the other side of the tracks. I think about my own man who beats up my mother and my mother who beats up my own man. I think about all that stuff. And somewhere way back there in the middle of the night, it dawned upon me what the problem was. It was alcohol. They drank, and they did those things. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to be like them. I'm going to be better than they are. I'm going to step out into that world. I'm going to have something. I'm going to do something. I'm going to be something. What do you do if you're weird? I'll tell you what I did. I took a drink. It wasn't any big decision on my part. I just took a drink of alcohol. And it was the most fantastic thing that ever happened to me in my life. It went down in there and it just kind of tore all the madness from me. It took me from the black pit of nothingness, stood me into the gray fringes, the business of living, installed in me some type of arrogance that said, damn you world, it's all right. I'm not good enough to be around the good people, but I'm too good to be around the bad people. It's okay right here. That's what alcohol did for me. If alcohol still did that, I'd still drink it. That's as simple as I know how to tell you. And the reason I don't drink alcohol or use drugs anymore, they don't work. They just don't work. Matter of fact, they quit working 10 years before I knew they did. I spent the last 10 years of my life running around out there in the world trying to find the answer into the hypodermic needle 10 years after it quit working. And the idea that went into my head and stayed in my head for a long, long time was, God damn it, it worked once, it's got to work again. It has to work again. You see, what really happened to me when I took my first drink of alcohol is a very simple thing for an alcoholic. I was enslaved and stuck into bondage to a feeling that happened to me when I took my first drink of alcohol. When I took my first drink of alcohol, that stuff went down inside of me and did that. I was enslaved with this feeling that I tried to recapture for the next 20 years of my life and never quite made it again, ever. Oh, from time to time there was temporary relief there. But I found out in my case it became more and more apparent that I had to have more and more and more and more of everything to get the same feeling that I'd had the last time. And pretty soon, after all these years, it became so elusive that it never came back. That all I'm looking for is oblivion. And I had trouble when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous for a long time, because I would hear people come to Alcoholics Anonymous and say things like, from this podium, say how they went to school and they studied and they became dentists and doctors and lawyers, and then they drank, and then the first thing they knew, they lost all that stuff. And I didn't understand that. I didn't understand it. And some of them didn't. Some of them didn't lose nothing. They were still driving their Mercedes and living on the mountains and doing all the things. And I didn't understand that either. And I used to say to myself, in my righteousness, in my judgmental situations, I'd say to myself, they can't be alcoholics like I am. I've come to understand something because the book Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me something about a disease called alcoholism I'm afflicted with. I've come to understand in the book Alcoholics Anonymous talks about our disease. It says in the beginning, every alcoholic, in the very beginning of this disease of alcoholism, everybody is drinking for the relief that comes from taking a drink of alcohol. And in the latter stages of this disease called alcoholism, every alcoholic is drinking for the same reason, for oblivion. I guess, in my own case, I was born in the latter stages of the disease called alcoholism. I never one time ever remember ever just going to say, I'm just going to take the edge off. I didn't have edges. I just drank. I took a drink of alcohol, and 3 days later they pulled me out from underneath a bridge and stood me in front of a judge and sentenced me to the Hutchinson State Reform School. 20 years later, I took a drink of alcohol. They pulled me out of a car in Compton, stood me in front of a judge, and sentenced me to 20 years in the penitentiary. That's what happened to me when I drank. I got drunk and went places. Heard that old story about let's get drunk and be something? I listened to the guy talking about chapter 3, he said something about taking a trip and not taking a trip. The only thing I didn't do in chapter 3 was I did not take a trip. You know, I always took a trip somewhere. And I didn't know, but, you know, being locked up, you know, the first time I went into an institution, they raised my standards of living. They did. First time I ever slept between sheets in my life was in a reform school. It's kind of hard to come back out there and face reality when you've been lying for so long, because we lie a lot in them places. Now, I know you don't know much about that, but there ain't no small-time crooks in jail. Did you know that? There ain't none. I mean, you know, I mean, if you, there ain't, I don't know who used to use all the dope, because all the dealers were in jail. I mean, everybody dealt. All had tons of dope, baby. 45 women and 18 Cadillacs. Everybody had that. I didn't know they sold that many Cadillacs out there. But usually by the end of that story, always somebody would say, "Would you save me a drag off that cigarette before you throw it away?" We're so big and bad we can't even afford a pack of cigarettes. You know, but we bad. You get so you think bad and you act bad and you smell bad. Be bad, because you see, if you're like me and you don't belong, you better get it together. You can't let nobody, you know, I mean, I don't know what you did in there, but we just sit around the domino tables and somebody say, "How you feeling today?" And say, "Oh, kind of inadequate." "What's the matter with you?" "I don't know. I have some kind of a sense of impending doom." I mean, we just didn't do that. I mean, that really wasn't in our intelligent conversation. We didn't do stuff like that. We lied to one another. And pretty soon what happens if you lie, if you hear yourself tell the lie long enough, pretty soon you cannot differentiate the true from the false. And you think that your life is the only normal one. And my life was getting loaded and going to jail. That's all. That's all I did. I didn't do anything else. I don't know anything about stopping drinking, quitting drinking, hanging it up, taking a couple and easing it off. I get it on out there. I just drink. And I drank, and I drank, and they arrested me. I lived with two thoughts in my head from my first drink to my last drink, and that was either get loaded or get the money to get loaded on. Heaven help you if you got between me and those two thoughts. That's all. I became willing to pay every price there was to pay. It didn't make any difference to me. If jail was the final, so what? Let's get loaded. Let's get out of this thing. Let's turn my head off. Let's get the tape stopped. Get this feeling out of my gut. Let's, just get ripped. And, in my day, they just wanted to arrest you. They just come and said, "Get in jail." "You get in the car, John." "Oh, okay." "What are we going to jail for this time, officer?" "I don't know. We'll find something, Johnny. You must be guilty about something." "Okay." To jail. That was before we had rights. They didn't read me the right. They just hit me in the head with something. "There's your right, sucker. Shut up." But that's the way I lived. And you see, I thought that was my life. I accepted my way of life. And the reason I accepted my way of life, because I knew that that was the best I was ever going to get. I knew that. I knew that, I'm one of them guys that the book talks about, that I spent my entire lifetime looking for lower companions. I never found any. By the time I got there, I was always less than. And when you're always less than, you got to try so hard. You got to try so hard just to catch up. Just to catch up. Not to be, because there's no thought of being better than. There's thought of just measured, so they won't find out that you're less than. You got to do more. You got to steal more money. You got to hurt more people. You got to use more dope. You got to have more broads and more. You got mama. It's almost never enough, but you got to do it just so they don't find out you don't belong there. Because when the heat's down and there's nobody around, I never really ever belonged anywhere. I was never really ever comfortable anywhere. And by the time I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and by the time I got to you, I didn't know what I was. I didn't know where I'd come from. I didn't know what was going on. I had so many ideas about what I was, I didn't know what I was. At any given moment, I become a Mexican. It didn't make any difference to me. My sponsor used to talk about drinking 10 high whiskeys. That's the best deal I ever got, that 10 high whiskey. He says it made you good looking and strong. I said, that wasn't nothing. He said, what? And I said, I used to stick a needle in my arm and became a Mexican. But that's the way I lived. And I never thought I was ever going to get out of it. I just kept going and going and going. And there was a time in my life when I was supposed that I had it all. 1948, 49, 50, I had all there is to have. I had more money than there was. I had apartment buildings. I lived in the top floor. I had closets full of $300 suits and big automobiles. I had people come around all hours of the night and day begging me for favors. Every once in a while, the big man gave them a favor. I couldn't leave the apartment because every time I did, they jumped on me and took me to jail. But I used to wander around in the street sometime in my big automobile in my new suit with nobody around to impress about what a big man I was. And I asked myself those questions. I'd drive up alongside of people in old beat-up pickup trucks who were going home from work, and I'd say to myself, I wonder why I'm not like him. Why can't I be like my brother? Why can't I just go to work and have a wife and a couple of kids? God, what's the matter with me? I didn't know. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I know on one thing, I was running out of people, places, things, circumstances, and conditions to blame for my dilemma. I knew that. I know it today. And you see, the thing that kept me from going totally insane, from my brain exploding, was my ability to blame somebody other than me for my own actions. And when I run out of people, places, things, circumstances, and conditions to blame for my dilemma, I could blame God for it. God's fault. He don't talk back. He's a great whipping post. Listen, you hear him in A. Listen to him all the time. And guess if God wants me to have a job, he'll shoot it down here to the club. Deal. Next time you get hungry, go lock yourself up in a closet and pray for a hot dog. If God squirts you one through the keyhole, call me. I've been looking for a deal like that all my life. I'll tell you what I've learned about God since I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous, and what my understanding of God is today. I've come to understand that my God will not do anything for me that I can do for myself. Nothing. And there's only been one single thing in my life that I've never been able to do. I was never able to do it before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I've never been able to do it since I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'll never be able to do it from this day forward. I've never of myself and by myself ever been able to keep from taking a drink of alcohol. I can't do that. I never have been able to. Now for over 27 years of my life, I haven't put any of that stuff in my system. And what's even more fascinating that to me is I haven't had a conscious thought or a conscious desire to put any of it in my system from the first moment I saw you to this very instant. Now that's what my God has done for me. Everything that's good and decent and normal in my life has been given to me by the grace of God through a miracle called Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything that's troubled me or upset me since I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous has been a direct result of my own actions and my own egotism and my own selfishness. That's all. I didn't know that when I came here. I didn't know that in 1951 when I stood in the old Los Angeles County Jail and my mother screamed at me through the visiting screen that I was a murderer. That my 17-year-old brother had gotten into some of my poison, taken an overdose of it, and died. I didn't know that. I didn't know that when I crawled up on a bunk after I'd come back from that visiting screen with some type of a feeling inside of me that I didn't understand, knowing I was supposed to be doing something but not knowing what I was supposed to do. No, I was supposed to feel something for something, but I didn't know what it was I was supposed to feel. I couldn't say that I was an animal because animals have more concern for things than I had. I was only concerned about my own well-being and my own images and my own selfishness. That's all I was ever concerned about. I stood out underneath a tree 3 days later, handcuffed between 2 detectives while they buried this baby brother. And this baby brother's the only thing in my life I ever cared anything about. I got it all. I got the guilt and the shame and humiliation and the degradation hanging around my shoulders, and I'd like to be able to cry, but I didn't know how. I didn't know how to feel nothing. I went to the penitentiary right up the road here and stayed there 4.5 years, came out there sicker than I was when I went in there, trying to prove what a psychiatrist told me in there, that people like me didn't change, that I was doomed to die in an institution. Took me down and showed me the green room and says, you're going to end up here, hot shot. And I told him, not me, I'm different. I'm different. I damn near died being different. I come walking out of that institution bound, determined I was going to beat that deal, and 6 months later I was laying in a nut house kicking and screaming. And that's when I made my round with some of the better laughing academies in the country, interviewing psychiatrists. Oh, I talked to them. We had great conversations. I sat there with my wraparound overcoat on, talked to them. They talked to me about my mother. I talked to them about their mother. They introduced me to a better thing called better living through electricity. Told me I had a bad attitude. They jolt you with that stuff. You have a bad attitude too, I think. One of the biggest lies I ever heard. I heard a guy in Alcoholics Anonymous say one time, he says, you'll never know humility till you've been humiliated. I've been humiliated by experts. It didn't give me any kind of humility. It made me angry. Made me hostile and violent. And the more they humiliated me, the more angry I became, and the more hostile and more violent I became, and the more I was going to get even. Didn't know anything about no humility, and it don't come through humiliation. I've been humiliated by experts. I've stood and looked at people who looked at me like I had dung hanging from my eyelids. I had my own people look at me like I was something that come out from underneath a rock. I stood in front of a judge who was sentenced to 20 years in the penitentiary, and he told a woman who was carrying my child, if you cared anything about that child, I'd actually get so far away from me I'd never been allowed to lay eyes on. I would call a blood-sucking parasite in society in front of 100 people. Said people weren't fit to live around me, and I wasn't fit to live around people. Tell me about humiliation. I crawled around in my own filth in a cell and barked at the moon. Humiliation, and I was the most angry, hostile person you ever saw in your life when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. On the first Sunday in November 1959, I wandered into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I just wandered into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I lay in a deathbed prior to that, 12, 13 months prior to that, laid in a deathbed with the doctor telling me I'm going to die. I wandered into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I sat in the back row with my coat collar up and my shades on because I was cool. If I'd been any cooler when I got here, I'd have probably froze to death, for God's sake. Sit there and looked up on the backboard. I saw 2 big A's, and I thought to myself, my God, I've wandered into an anti-aircraft again. Know what Alcoholics Anonymous was. I had no way of knowing. They weren't advertising on TV in those days. I mean, just no call for us. I said to this clown sitting next to me, I never will forget, I said to him, what is this? He says, it's Alcoholics Anonymous. I sunk down in my seat. Gangsters weren't supposed to be hanging out with them winos. If it had been Gangsters Anonymous or Over-Hip Anonymous or Do-Do-Do's Anonymous or Dope Fiends Anonymous, that was pre-addict days. Anything. So I sat in these meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I waited for these people to get up and tell their racy stories. Waited for these women to get up there and tell me about all the stuff they'd done. And there was something about these people that I'd never seen anywhere in my life before. They had sort of a peace about them, I suppose. That's the best description I know of today. I didn't know it then. These people had smiles on their faces and twinkles in their eyes, and they radiated something. They weren't like the people I was running around with. They ruined it. They started talking about God. When I came here and you talked to me about God, I got up and ran out of the room. God was the reason I was. I came back to your meeting the following week for the same reason I came to the meeting tonight. Same reason. I came back to the meeting to see these people because these people fascinate me. The people of Alcoholics Anonymous have always fascinated me. Because there's something that happens to me in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting that happens to me no place else upon the face of this earth. I've been everywhere else. Something happens to me. No matter what's happening to me, I can walk in and sit down with you and know that I'm safe. No matter what's coming down out there, I know I'm safe here. I've always known that for some strange reason. I used to see these strange people who drove 185 miles to come up there and talk to me about God. They talked to me about God, I ran out of the room, and I wandered around, and I'd think about these people, and every once in a while I'd grab one of them convicts and throw him up against the wall, look in his eyes and say, you don't have it, and turn around and walk off. You get a lot of strange comments in those places when you start doing stuff like that. One day I sat in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, a little guy that I knew did 23 years in penitentiary, stood at a podium very much like this and told me the thing I'd waited all my life to hear. He told me I didn't have to live that way anymore if I didn't want to. He says, you don't have to live like this no more. You know, nobody had ever told me that. They'd been telling me all my life not to drink, swallow, smoke, and shoot. But they never told me how to live without doing it. How do you live in a world that you don't belong to? That wants no part of you and you don't want any part of? And the only thing that makes it bearable for just an instant out there is something that you put in your system. I walked up to this guy after the meeting and I said to him, Les, how do you learn how to live? That's all I wanted to know. He looked at me and he said, Johnny, there's a book called Alcoholics Anonymous in the library. You go get that book and I'll go home and pray that you find some part of you in it. I guess he's prayed real hard, that little fellow. I've been a student of the book Alcoholics Anonymous from that day to this day. And the only thing I've ever found in that book is me. I haven't looked for anything else. I'm not looking for a way to sober up the world or cure all of society's ills. I'm looking for a way to live peacefully and comfortably and joyously with me and the loving God that made me. There is a strange phenomena that takes place in my life, and I'd like to share that with you. It seems like to me that the closer I adhere to the principles that are written in that book, and the more willing I become to share that knowledge in this fellowship, just for the sheer joy of doing it, the more peaceful and the more comfortable and the more joyous I live with me and the loving God that made me. I had a lot of trouble when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. People like me have trouble when they come to Alcoholics Anonymous because they don't belong here. I was restless and irritable and discontent, and I was different. But I prided myself in my differences. And the more prideful I became in my differences, the sicker I became. And the sicker I became, the more prideful I became, and the more different I became. And I'd sit in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'd listen for the differences in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd hear people say things like, I used to drink, I don't drink anymore, and everything is wonderful. I'd say, I'm not alcoholic then. I'm not drinking either, and I'm crazy. I didn't understand it. See, when sobriety is your enemy, and you're different, and they talk about drinking and not drinking is the answer, you know that's not the answer. You know that's wrong. What I knew was that I wasn't an alcoholic. See, I knew if I was an alcoholic, all I would have to do is not drink. If I was an alcoholic, I knew that. It's not true. If I had an alcohol problem, all I would have to do is not drink, and I would be all right. When I'm an alcoholic, I suffer from a disease called alcoholism. And when sobriety is my problem and drinking is my answer, the problem is not alcohol. The problem is the disease. I didn't know that because I didn't identify with this thing. I heard people say things like, you got to get active in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got active in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got up and I ran around and I picked up chairs. I poured coffee. I smiled at people. Wonderful. I went back and stood in the corner back there with all the hipsters and died. Because I was doing everything they told me to do. And my inside didn't match their outsides. I didn't have that quietness about me that they had. The rage was still in there. And I didn't understand them. I read their book. It didn't make any sense to me. I threw it across the room. And I went over and picked it up one night and looked down and saw the most simple statement I'd ever seen in my life. It said, how it works. Wouldn't you know, I almost missed that. I guess I was like a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I guess I was jockeying for position when they read the 5th chapter. Or trying to see who could see if I was there. Or whatever they do. Who sit through these meaningless things in Alcoholics Anonymous. So they can get around to the real stuff. You know it's already been told here in Alcoholics Anonymous tonight. By you who don't know. Who makes this program, who doesn't, and why not? Do you know that? Barbara read it. The mystery is no mystery to me anymore. It's very factual. And reading is factual because I've been close to and active in Alcoholics Anonymous and only Alcoholics Anonymous for 27 years of my life. And in the first paragraph that was read here in the 5th chapter tonight, it says this. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. And where it's killed more people than anything that I know of, it says simple program. And that's not keen enough for a keen alcoholic mind like mine. You ever stop to wonder that the only people who tell you about the keen alcoholic mind is the alcoholic? Nobody ever else said, look at that clean alcoholic mind there, flopping around down there in the gutter. I'm sure them guys in them nut houses right before they threw that switch, they said, watch this keen alcoholic mind jump. Just alcoholics tell you they've got keen alcoholic mind. I found it necessary to fulfill the condition of a program of recovery called Alcoholics Anonymous while confined in an institution. I'm so grateful for that sometimes I can't see because I know I'd have never been able to come to Alcoholics Anonymous on the streets. My differences were so great. My hate and my bitterness, my guilt were so great, I'd have never made it. I could have never walked in the door of Alcoholics Anonymous on the street. I had to be confined. But you see, I think God knew that. I think my God knew what it took for a guy like me to get here. You know where I admitted I was an alcoholic? In my 5th step. In my 5th step. I could admit that I was an alcoholic through the first 4 steps of this program, Alcoholics Anonymous. I wrote an inventory, and I sit down with a man. I spent 3.5 hours with him. I told him about every rotten, filthy, corruptible thing I'd ever done in my life. And somewhere in my 5th step, I heard myself say to this man that I was an alcoholic. And from that thing, there came a relief and a freedom from inside of me that I carry with me to this very day. Do you know why I'm free today? I'm free today because I know what I am. I know what's the matter with me. I haven't got a bunch of them stumbling blocks called andas attached around me. I'm not an anda nothing. I was once. Oh, was I once. When I first come to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was a convict. Ain't that bad? Convict. Not inmate, convict. I was a convict, and I became a convict and a dope fiend. I was just right on back there. And I became a convict and a dope fiend and a young person. I had so many handles attached to me that I looked like a dirigible with a tail hanging on it floating down the road. And you know what they are? I'll tell you exactly what they are. They're differences. They're conscious separations from. And they're doorways that allow you to walk right out of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what they do. They're little walls that kept me from being apart from, and my denial, that's what I was. And you know what I am today? I'm just an alcoholic. Just an alcoholic. I don't know what that means to you, but I tell you what it means to me. That means that if I'm an alcoholic and you're an alcoholic, and you have to do something to stay sober, so do I. But by the same token, if I'm an alcoholic and you're an alcoholic and I have to do something to stay sober, so do you. I don't no longer have the option, because I don't have any conscious separation from, of saying, I don't have to do that, but you do, because you're an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic, and all I got to do is not drink. I don't have that option anymore. And the funny thing has happened to me. I'm no longer different here either. I've been a part of Alcoholics Anonymous from that admission to this very instant. And if you were sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous tonight, I would only pray one thing for you. I would only pray that you remove all your differences and join us in this fellowship of the Spirit. Quit being different, for God's sakes. What difference does it make? What difference? Our lives are on the line. I mean, if your life is worth some type of a sick image that you're packing, pack it. Difference does it make? I'll tell you what difference it makes. It makes a difference between life and death. This is Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what it is. It's not Alcoholics Anonymous and anything. It's just Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what I am. You see, when I admitted that I had this terrible malady called alcoholism, and found that there was a solution within the book Alcoholics Anonymous, I became willing to do what all the rest of those old fuddy-duddies had to do to get well. And the people of Alcoholics Anonymous gathered me in their arms and rocked me to sleep and taught me how to be a human being. They set me in rooms and they talked to me about my language, because my vocabulary consisted of about 4 four-letter words. Mother was a trigger that made it all work around there somewhere. And they told me things like cussing was a crutch for conversational cripples. And they said, we don't say things like that, Johnny, we do it like this. This is a spiritual program of recovery. And then they stood my wrath when they corrected me, because I rained on them. I don't change easy. I don't change easy at all. And you don't, when a guy with a monumental ego like me doesn't take correction very easy. And then I came out of that penitentiary 25 and a half years ago to a world I didn't know anything about. I still don't know anything about it. Like a little kid out there running around the candy store from time to time. I don't know what's going on. I don't. I came wandering out of that penitentiary. I went home to see my mother. She fell off the steps blind drunk. I picked her up and put her on the couch. Said, Mom, I'm going to an AA meeting. She said, fine, I think you should. My mother's still drinking. My mother was drunk last week. My mother's taught me the greatest lesson I know about Alcoholics Anonymous and its people. My mother taught me that I do not have the power to get anybody sober. I don't have the power to get them drunk either. If I had the power to get anybody sober, I wouldn't be here tonight. I'd be in Long Beach where my baby daughter needs to get sober. I'd be in Huntington Park where my mother needed to get sober. But you see, I don't have that power. I don't even have any power to keep me sober. Where would I get any power? I don't have any power. When I get here, I don't have any power. I got a daily reprieve from this malady of mine contingent upon what I do, and how I live, and my spiritual nature. That's what my book tells me. That's what my book says. I got right this instant, right now. This is what counts. Not yesterday. Tomorrow. No. Today I got right now. And man, I'm going to tell you something. If you could have lived this day with me today and could have felt and seen what Alcoholics Anonymous can do, not for the alcoholic, but for the people around the alcoholic. If you could see that tremendous miles and distances that Alcoholics Anonymous can remove people and the different things, if you could just see that, and the power that's manifested itself through these simple solutions this simple program of recovery called Alcoholics Anonymous. If you could have seen that, then you would come to understand the very meaning of the word God and the power that's manifested itself in that word. You know why I'm sober in Alcoholics Anonymous tonight? I found the thing. I found it. I found the thing that I thought I found when I took a drink of alcohol when I was 7 or 8 years old. I found the thing that I thought I found when I stuck a needle in my arm at 13. I found it. I not only found it, I live in it and have it all around me. It's in my every fiber of my being. It's when I wake up on it. It's when I go to sleep on every night. I wouldn't trade places with anybody who lives upon the face of this earth. Not me. You can have it all out there. You can be anything you want to be. Me, I just want to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to serve this fellowship to the best of my ability. This fellowship is all I've ever needed. I get sick and tired of hearing people saying, this ain't enough. You ain't found what's here. If this ain't enough, that's all I got to tell you. Anybody who ain't found what's here don't know what's here. I mean, that's deep, huh? You ain't found it, you ain't found it. I can tell you, it's been enough for me. It's kept me, it's taken me from places and put me in places you wouldn't believe. And I have never been anywhere else. You know what's the difference between me and that thing that was crawling around that cell 27 years ago, 28 years ago? A program called Alcoholics Anonymous. There hasn't been anything else infused. There ain't been nothing there. I haven't done anything else. And I live a life that people don't even believe. I don't even believe it. Man, I come walking out of that penitentiary 25 and a half years ago, and I had one of them sponsors and went to school for heart. I'm sorry, God. Yeah, he's either telling you you better listen or me to cool it, one or the other. This sponsor of mine must have went to school for hard-hearted sponsors. I mean, he did not have the slightest idea that I was sensitive. You know, he didn't care. Man, was he ornery. Told me I had to go to work. I said, what? He said, work. I said, what's that? He said, work. I mean, real deep words. Great psychological meanings, he told me. Work. And I said, what am I supposed to do? He said, work. I mean, my keen alcoholic mind could not get that all at once. I thought I'd been sober in the penitentiary for 1.5 years, and I came out of that penitentiary. I thought I should have some type of a junior executive job. I didn't want to be president right away. A little light vice president to start with would be fine, and then I would move. I finally found out what I was capable of doing. I couldn't even dig a ditch. I didn't know how. A guy gave me a job in the oil field, and I showed up to work there one day, and the guy said to me, what's your Social Security card number, kid? I said, what? He says, your Social Security card. And I said, what's that? He says, you don't have a Social Security card? And I said, You know, I thought that was something. I don't know what it was. He said, how old are you? And I said, I'm 30. And I'm very proud of that. You know, I made it. The doctor said I wasn't going to live till I was 22. Here I'm 30. I'm gone there. He said, where have you been all these years? And I said, you wouldn't understand if I told you. And he screwed up. He took me down and got me a Social Security card. See, I was hoping he wouldn't put me to work so I could go tell my sponsor they won't hire me. Put me to work out in that oil field. They damn near killed me out there. I didn't know how to do nothing. I put all the wrenches on backwards. And finally, I used to watch them when they got paid. You ever watch them when they get paid? You know what they do? They go get the wife and the kids, and they go buy groceries in the market. That's what they do. I used to watch them. I used to stand off on the corner and watch them as they come in. Oh. By the time I finally got around to working and getting a paycheck, my wife had come back, and she had our baby daughter with her. And so I ran home with this paycheck, and I said, let's go to the market. She says, we don't need anything. I said, I don't care. We're going to the market anyhow. That's what they do when they get paid. She says, who? And I said, them. He just put the kid in the car and says, come on, we're going to go to the market. Somebody stole my paycheck. You want to hear somebody scream? You want to hear a thief when they get stolen from. My very first paycheck they stole. Now, that's a dirty deal. You know what I mean? Who would have blamed me if I'd have got ripped, right? I mean, AA don't work if they steal your paycheck. I'm telling you, if I could have caught the guy that took that purse, there'd be a different talker here tonight. I'll guarantee you that. I'd be up there in Folsom telling you that AA don't work. I got all through with my insanity and my ranting and raving. I sat down and she poured me a cup of coffee. She said, you all through? And I said, yep. And she said, now you know how it feels. I went back to work that afternoon and I got another paycheck, and I've been getting paychecks ever since. No big deal. You work, they pay you. I mean, that's simple. I mean, you go to work and they pay you. Things happen, things don't happen. I had another baby daughter born, and my 5th or 6th year of sobriety, my wife took her own life. I didn't handle that very well either. I handled like I handled most things. I got mad at it, made it go away. My sponsor told me that God loved me a great deal, and I didn't think I could love me very much. I didn't feel that at all. I was ready to leave AA, and he told me to give big crosses to big hoss. He gave little crosses to guys named John. It's true. I guess what he really told me that day was that I have no immunity against life because I was sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. I guess that's what he told me. And you know the people who've been trying to teach me and cuddle me, my father in Alcoholics Anonymous and my sponsor and all these people who have gone before me and the people who love me only try to teach me one thing, that I'm not immune from life and I'm just basically a human being. When I get in Alcoholics Anonymous, what's dealt to everybody else. I have no immunity because I'm not drinking alcohol or using drugs and going to Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. I have no immunity from life. It's the tragedies of life are not going to pass me by just because I'm sober. And one of the greatest lessons I ever learned in my life, I learned from an old man who died a couple of years ago, who was like a father to me. I sit around in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and I hear these people talk about being the chosen ones. I ain't. I don't believe there's such a thing as a chosen one. I think most the highest form of egotism for me to be to tell you that I'm chosen or that we're chosen. My father in Alcoholics Anonymous told me that we were all God's children, all of us. That's what he said. He said he makes the rain fall on the just as well as the unjust. Isn't that amazing? It just don't rain on them bad folks. And I said to him, then how come I'm sober, Papa? How come I'm sober? Because I know that people right in this room tonight are going to die drunk. Far better people than I'll ever be. There's far better people who will die and never come to Alcoholics Anonymous. Far better people than I'll ever hope to be in my lifetime. I've known people come to Alcoholics Anonymous, far better people than I've ever been, and couldn't stay sober and die drunk. And so I said to him in my questioning little childish way, I said to him, then how come I'm sober? He says, because you've come to understand and somebody told you you're one of God's children. That's all. And then they demonstrated through their acts that you're one of God's kids, and so God treats you like one of God's kids. It becomes the Father's great pleasure to give you His kingdom. And I've learned about that from my own children. It's become my great pleasure to give my children my kingdom. If they don't accept it, the only requirement is they got to act like my kids. And so when I learned that from this old man, my primary purpose in life became only this, is to stay sober and to carry this message to the alcoholic who still suffers, because I want them all to know. I want to go out there and I want to spread the good news. I want to tell them about the things that I know about. I want to tell them about the lame walking and the blind seeing and the deaf hearing. I want to tell them about it because I live in it. I want to tell them about the gospel of the good news, that there is life after death. And it's called Alcoholics Anonymous. For an alcoholic, a practicing alcoholic, that is death. For an alcoholic with a disease called alcoholism, Alcoholics Anonymous is life. The book Alcoholics Anonymous says we're reborn. That means before we can be reborn, I guess we've got to die. And what I had to die to before I could come here and stay here and accept these things, I had to die to self. That's what I had to die to. And I've come to understand that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and everything entailed in this book is nothing new at all. I've come to understand that. And the reason I've come to understand that is because I found out that in the 14th and 15th century there were people talking about these things. There was an old man that said that if you were to find God, you'd have to look deep within yourselves. And there was a guy who lived in the 14th century who said that heaven absorbs the vacuum, but God absorbs the vacuum even more under heaven and earth. Empty yourself of self, said he, and you will be automatically full of God. Isn't that amazing? The book Alcoholics Anonymous says we take a searching and a fearless moral inventory of ourselves. We admit to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. We empty ourselves of self. The third step of our program's recovery says, relieve me from the bondage of self. Selfishness and self-centeredness. And I hear people talk about these things all the time in Alcoholics Anonymous. I hear people talk about love before they came here, and God before they came here. I had belief, and I didn't, folks. I'm sorry. I was so selfish and self-centered and self-seeking before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. There was nothing in my world but me, and my own comfort and my own well-being. I'm sorry, that's the way it was with me. However it was with somebody else is however it was with somebody else. But you see, I'm an alcoholic. All my life I thought I got a bad deal. When I was a kid, I thought I got a bad deal, and that's all I thought about. When I took a drink, that's all I thought about was drinking. When I started going to institutions, all I ever did think was about getting out so I could start drinking again. And that's all I ever thought about was me, I, me, I. Now I come into Alcoholics Anonymous, and through this simple program of recovery, and through this fellowship that I live in and have my being, from time to time in my life, I have been more concerned about your well-being and your happiness than I am my own. And that's the type of day I had today. I've become more concerned with somebody else's happiness and more happy for somebody else's happiness and joy than I was in my own. That wouldn't have been possible 28 years ago because I didn't think about anybody else. I thought about me, and only me. So therefore I was in deeper bondage than alcohol or drugs had ever put me in. I guess by now you've come to understand that I really love Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you don't know that, I'd like to tell you that. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I love it more than anything in the world because it is my world. Because of Alcoholics Anonymous, everything that I have and everything that I may ever be is because of Alcoholics Anonymous and my participation, nothing else. God, as I understand Him, is the byproduct of these 12 steps working in my life. God, as I understand Him. I hear people say all the time, when you get in problems, pray. Go pray. Go in the corner and pray. Ask Him, turn it over. Do you know that in the last couple of 3 years of my life, it's been humanly impossible for me to pray. The pain was so severe at times. In the middle of the night, I could not sleep. I could not sleep. I could not conjure up a vision. I could not get a prayer. I could not communicate with anything. And you know the thing that gave me peace? I would think about one of you. And somewhere in my mind, somebody that I was working with, some newcomer at that particular time, I could recall the light coming into their eyes and the peace coming into their face. And I knew that there was a power working here. And if that power would work in their life, they'd work in mine. And so it became humanly impossible for me to think about God without thinking about Alcoholics Anonymous. It became humanly impossible for me to think about Alcoholics Anonymous without thinking about its fellowship. To me, they're synonymous. I cannot think about one without the other. And I'd like to tell you about a little truism. It's the only truism that I know. And it's the greatest truism I've ever heard. And it's this. If you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting. Isn't that deep? I mean, it's heavy. In Bellflower, it goes right over their head. But you're such a deep group, I knew you would grasp that right away and take it and run with meaning. You know, that means what it says. I mean, there's no psychological implication there. If you're sitting in this meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you have that football in your gut, and you're different, and you don't belong, and you don't want to be here, keep doing what you're doing. You keep getting what you're getting. But if you're sitting in this meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you have a quiet heart, and all is right with you and the world and the people in it, then keep doing what you're doing. You'll keep getting what you're getting. I don't know about you, or anybody else who lives upon the face of this earth. I'd like to share this with you. I think that for me, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because I sure do like what I'm getting. Thank you.